If I were to tell you that the most dangerous moment in modern American history didn't happen in a war zone or during a political coup, but on a quiet Tuesday in January 2026, you'd probably ask what I was talking about. There were no sirens, no explosions, and no immediate panic. But on that day, something fundamental in the United States finally snapped. For decades, we've lived under the illusion that America's infrastructure, its power grids, its water systems, and its logistics networks was an unbreakable machine. We assumed that when we flipped a switch, the lights would come on. We assumed that when we ordered a package, it would arrive. But in early 2026, during the peak of Winter Storm Fern, the machine didn't just malfunction, it suffered a systemic fracture. Welcome to the hidden reality of the Great American Breakdown. This is the shocking moment something big broke in the United States. To understand what broke, we have to look at the grid of fragility. The American power grid is often called the largest machine ever built by man. It is a sprawling, interconnected web of wires and transformers that was designed for the world of the 1960s. But in 2026, it is being pushed to its absolute physical limit. During Winter Storm Fern, the largest power grid in the US, the PJM interconnection, issued a series of desperate alerts to transmission and generation firms. This wasn't just about high demand, it was about the fact that the grid had reached a point of thermal exhaustion. The physical infrastructure, the literal copper and steel, could no longer handle the load of a nation that has electrified everything while neglecting the pipes that carry the current. The shocking moment happened when the grid didn't just go dark, it began to decouple. In several states across the South, the frequency of the electricity began to fluctuate wildly. This is the nightmare scenario for engineers. If the frequency drops too low, the entire system can shatter in a matter of seconds to prevent the hardware from melting. For the first time in history, the US had to resort to controlled decoupling, effectively cutting off entire regions of the country from each other to prevent a national blackout. America didn't just lose power, it lost its unity. The machine that binds the nation together was broken, and it proved that the D grade that experts have been giving US infrastructure for years wasn't an exaggeration. It was a prophecy. The vulnerability is not a lack of energy. It's the fact that the bridge between the power and the people is falling apart. And then there is the logistics heart attack. While the grid was flickering, the American supply chain was suffering a massive systemic stroke. For years, we've operated on a just-in-time model, a system where nothing is stored and everything is in motion. But in January 2026, the motion stopped. A report from DP World highlighted a rising cost of disruption that has become unsustainable. 50% of North American businesses lost more than a month of operational time in 2025, and by 2026, that friction reached a breaking point. The shocking moment occurred when the last mile failed. In 2026, UPS announced it was cutting up to 30,000 positions and launching a massive driver buyout program. This wasn't just a business decision, it was a signal that the cost of moving goods in America has become higher than the value of the goods themselves. When the winter storm hit, the miracle of delivery simply vanished. Supermarket shelves in major cities went empty, not because there was no food, but because the software-driven logistics could no longer handle the physical reality of a broken transport network. The US realized that it had built a digital economy on top of a physical foundation that was crumbling. The break was the realization that in 2026, the United States is no longer a country that can move things efficiently. It has become a high-friction nation. The vulnerability is not a lack of goods. It's the fact that the circulatory system of the economy has developed a permanent blockage. Open loop, but the grid and the trucks are only the visible symptoms. The most shocking break was the digital trust fracture. As the physical systems were failing, the digital systems that manage them were being targeted by a new kind of warfare. In 2026, the US air transport system was described as becoming more prone to dangerous failures. The break happened when a series of glitches, likely the result of asymmetric cyber sabotage, caused a near-simultaneous failure of the FAA's NOTAM system and the communication networks of 3 major airlines. For 6 hours, the American sky was empty. This wasn't just a technical error, it was the moment the American public realized that their digital sovereignty was a myth. The systems that run the country are so complex and so interconnected that no one actually knows how to fix them when they break at the same time. The shocking realization was that the US has created a complexity trap, a system so advanced that it is actually more fragile than the primitive systems it replaced. The vulnerability is not a lack of security, it's the fact that the system is too complex to be defended. This brings us to the dam and water crisis. While the world was looking at the power lines, the water was rising. There are thousands of dams across the US that are described as old, damaged, and unable to cope with extreme weather. The shocking moment occurred when a series of smaller, unmonitored dams in the Midwest failed during the January rains. These weren't the famous dams like Hoover or Glen Canyon. They were the invisible dams. the ones that hold back the water for thousands of small communities. When they broke, they didn't just flood towns. They severed the water supply for critical industrial cooling and agricultural irrigation. The US realized that its water infrastructure is a ticking time bomb that has been ignored for 50 years. The break was the physical collapse of the systems that provide the most basic necessity of life. The vulnerability is not a lack of water. It's the fact that the vessels that hold it are rotting from the inside out. Finally, we have to talk about the insurability gap. The Global Risks Report 2026 issued a chilling warning. The insurability of critical infrastructure failures could decline. This is the ultimate break. In 2026, the financial system finally admitted that it can no longer afford to cover the cost of the American breakdown. Insurance companies are pulling out of entire regions, not just because of climate change, but because the infrastructure is too unreliable to insure. When you can no longer insure a power plant, a bridge, or a warehouse, you can no longer get a loan to build or maintain it. The shocking moment was the arrival of the uninsurable economy. The US realized that it is no longer wealthy enough to fix what it has broken, and the private sector is no longer willing to take the risk. So, why is this so shocking? Because it shows that the United States is suffering from a slow motion collapse. It isn't a single explosion. It is the sound of 1,000 small things breaking at once until the whole structure begins to lean. The moment something big broke was the moment the American people realized that the D grade for infrastructure wasn't a grade on a report card. It was the operating reality of their lives. The next time you flip a switch and the lights flicker, or you see an empty shelf at the store, or you hear about a technical glitch at the airport, don't think of it as an isolated incident. Think of it as the echo of the break. Because in the end, the United States didn't break because of an enemy invasion. It broke because it forgot that a superpower is only as strong as its physical foundation. The fight for the future of America is no longer about ideology or politics. It is a fight for maintenance. It is a fight to fix the machine before the controlled decoupling becomes a permanent divorce. The shocking reason something big broke is that we simply stopped paying attention to the things that make the country work. And in 2026, the bill finally came due.